Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to this webinar. My name is Byron Noble, and I'll be your organizer for the session. And with me today is Kelly Burton. I have a short video I'd like to play just before handing over to our presenter.
Do you work for yourself or run your own company? A lack of knowledge about finances and financial management can limit your growth. The Tools function on App Plumber offers you assistance in calculating your call-out fees and service rates so that your business not merely survives but also makes a profit. Install App Plumber today and use the tool functions to make sure you charge your worth.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That's it from my side, and I'd like to hand over to our presenter.
Good morning, everybody. Byron, can you guys see my screen?
There we go. We can see your screen now.
Okay. Right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our session today. This is going to more take the form of a discussion between myself and Steve Brown. Steve is sitting on the other side as well. And then obviously we're also looking at questions. Let's get this thing transformed into a question and answer session on the topic that we are talking about today. Steve, I don't know if you just want to also come in there quickly.
Yeah, thanks, Kerry, and morning, everyone. From a wet KZN, Byron and I were just having a brief chat this morning. But I think, our TED Talk today, Kerry, is that we see this all too often, plumbers taking responsibility or for a design or an installation that was in place before, and then we start picking up challenges. So this is, again, a couple of photos that have been sent to us, to just have a discussion in terms of installations and where we have some challenges and where we have that old story, Boermaka plan. Well, we'll see a couple of these now in terms of those plans. But I think the risk that comes with this, without asking any questions, beforehand and trying to adapt, an installation to to a building. So if we go and have a look at that first one, Kerry, we'll go and see that there's some welding that's been done there. This is a geyser that's slung underside a soffit, above a passage. And, again, when you just go and have a look at this installation, as I said, the guy reckons that this thing had Parkinson's disease. You just touched it and it just carried on shaking for a good couple of minutes thereafter. So if we go and see what's happened here, we've got a geyser that was suspended under soffit. It's obviously had some thread bars, some anchors that have been installed under soffit. And obviously, as time's gone on, as we know, geysers have gone, they are actually wider now because of the thicker installation with the B-rated geysers. And, now you've got a geyser that's burst, you're restricted in many, many ways. And now it's up to the plumber, who now makes a decision in terms of how he's going to reinstall this particular unit. So if we see here, the plumber's got some gallows brackets, he's cut, he's welded, he's done some things, and then he's adapted that bracket to mount the geyser, to that bracket. So again, when you have a look at it, we've got to ask the question, did the plumber actually ask, or go and seek guidance in terms of that? And we're going to go on to what the standards say with regards to, fixing a geyser under soffit or into concrete. Further, if you go and have a look at it, the picture on the right, now you have the TP discharge pipe. It's got a short stub of pipe on it. And this is a walkway. This is where people are walking, to and fro to flats and cleaners and everything else. And again, we fully understand what the standards say with regards to the discharge from the TP valve. So again, it goes back to, there's a lot of things out there. What were they thinking? And I think these are the things that we're trying to get away from, where the plumber puts himself at risk. I think the plumber is going in there and maybe through lack of understanding of standards or what is required, there's other things that come out of that. If you look at the picture on the left, where they've drilled into soffit and tried to secure that. Again, what happens with rebar when it gets exposed to moisture and ingress of water, all of a sudden you start popping it becomes spalling, and you can clearly see on the picture on the right where the other holes have been cut chased away, whatever, no patching, no protection, or nothing. So these are the type of things, and it's not uncommon. So let's just be real. These are not uncommon. And possibly at the beginning of this project, there was a competent person that designed this. And I think the question comes through is that does that design follow through now for the rest of its days? When you actually, reinstalling a geyser that's now been changed or modified to try and suit there. So this was an interesting one in terms of trying to get to a point. If you look at where Gerry's pointer is, you'll start to see where, those things are there. There's quite a few of them. If you go back to the far right there, Gerry, you'll see where holes have been tried or drilled and possibly hit rebar. So just directly up from there, you'll see, additional holes that have been drilled and obviously hit rebar, and you can't put the anchors in or even get the threaded rod to support it. So yeah, this is quite a bit of a challenge in terms of that. And even the fixations on the L-shaped bracket or the gallows bracket on the other side there are not secured correctly. So there's quite a lot of movement, in terms of where the fixation is and where it's slung underside a soffit. And then you can see, by just the brackets, Gerry, if you go down, to the brackets themselves, look at the angle that's at, where it's been bent and tried to be secured. So yeah, there was other issues here, but this was the main one in terms of, this installation. Anything you want to add, Gerry? And again,
also, if I remember correctly, this was close to the coast as well. So, if we're looking at where there was welding done, even the anchor bolts, there's a lot of metal that's exposed here. And as you said earlier, rebar in the slab that might be exposed. And so this can create all sorts of problems. And if you look at this bracket here, you can already see there's strain there on that section of the bracket where obviously, it is going to at some point start pulling down. So yeah, definitely a lot of risks involved in this whole situation.
And I think, Gerry, for me, is that, and we understand the plumbers out there, you're under pressure, you get that same question. It's been like that all the time, etc. But I think, it's to look at it and ask the relevant questions, because we're going to go to what the standard says with regards to mounting a geyser under soffit or concrete. Now, if you go and have a look at these next ones, now you'll see there's again, other anchors that have been put in. But now, because of the width of the geyser and rebar and everything else, you'll see that now what's happened is the threaded rod's actually been bowed and supported, underneath onto the brackets or onto the legs of the geyser. So again, the question comes out, in terms of, is that secure? I'm not standing here and saying, well, it is or isn't, but, just by virtue of the fact that the geysers have changed in terms of diameter with it being B-rated, trying to put it back with the same sort of fixations that are there. The plumbers now, again, trying to make a plan by bending and trying to do all of these things. So again, a challenge. We also have issues with vacuum breakers. If you go to the top right, you'll go and see positioning of vacuum breakers. And again, not being able to get the 300 or putting it on the 700 directly on the line, or with 700. And, even to an extent of an anti-siphon loop, you can't get that in. So these are questions that we're trying to expose this morning and say to the plumber, what were those questions that should have been asked before we did this? And I think that's what we want to try and do today, is that info session in terms of what should have been done. I mean, when you go and just look at the wiring, for the geyser itself, you can touch that, you can pull it, it's not secure. There's a multitude of sins here. In terms of these installations. So yeah, it's just about asking a question, I think, Gerry, for me. And then here we have one that, again, we got all of the same challenges, and go and have a look at it. I mean, the guy who's done this has obviously thought about it, but we don't know what grade timber it is. We don't know what has been done. There was obviously a concern from the plumber when he did this, that he felt the need to install a chain to try and support it. So that in itself, it's not about the chain. I'm asking the question of why have it if you were, a little bit sort of insecure in terms of how this was being supported. So again, restrictions and design, creates these type of issues. And again, you'll see all the additional holes that have been built trying to support it. And I think it's just it's a challenging installation. We're directly above windows, trying to get space. It's quite a bit of a nightmare in terms of an installation.
I think one of the other things, Steve, is that, and we all understand that obviously, being the people that we are, we always try and help the client and make a plan and see how we can get this thing done cost effectively, but we are opening the door. And if we now move on and look at what the regulation says, in 10252, it says here, under section 7, an approved competent person shall accept the responsibility for the design of a structure that supports a water heater or storage tank of which the nominal capacity exceeds 250 liters. That's one. And then we're looking at what we are talking about this morning under B, a slab or a roof structure where a water heater or storage tank of any capacity is suspended from the underside of such a slab or roof structure. So, it's clear in terms of our regulations that I think we need to be very careful. And again, a competent person, what is that competent person, or who is that person? And yes, although you may be a qualified plumber and you have a lot of experience, it does not make you a competent person in terms of the regulation. And therefore, I've put in here, what does 10400A says, what's the description of a competent person? And that competent person is a person who is registered in an appropriate category of registration in terms of architectural profession, engineering profession, natural scientific, and any other relevant act. So, from my point of view, I think we need to be very, very careful not to open the door where we do designs and all of these type of things, because if something goes wrong, you are going to be held liable. And I think that is the big message that we need to bring across today, is that although we are willing to help, we want to do things, we try and see how we can maybe assist the client not to spend too much money. But you need to make the decision that at some point you need to take a step back and say, whoa, I cannot do this. And those pictures that we saw, I think, speaks for itself. Steve?
Very 100%. And I think the one that we all, go is a structure that supports a water heater or storage tank of which the nominal capacity exceeds 250 liters. So if you ask the majority of plumbers, that's the one that they will reference and everything else. But B, a slab or roof structure where a water heater or storage tank of any, and that's the key thing, any. We're not talking about 250 liters anymore. We're talking about any capacity is suspended from the underside of such slab or roof structure. And I think that's the one that we're missing. We're missing in terms of this. And that's, we've seen many of these where the plumber's taking the responsibility for it. And I think the key thing for me is any capacity. Is that if you're mounting a geyser underside of a soffit and or underneath a concrete slab, whatever, that SANS 10400 AZ4, that competent person is the key critical item. And again, we're just trying to get to a point of where the plumber now understands where he fits into the chain and taking responsibility, and that rational design that is done and conducted by that competent person now takes the responsibility away from the plumber, who, as you just said, Gerry, we always want to jump in. It's the nature of the plumber to be able to get in, solve problems, get things done. But sometimes we just need to think about what the standard says and are we putting ourselves at risk? And you and I discussed this a while ago. When two boxers get into a ring, it's about protect yourself at all times. And I think we need to apply that in our business and how we do things.
Yeah, and I think, Steve, I didn't add that in here, but if we look at, we go through the building regulations as well as the local bylaws, and that's something that sometimes also is forgotten about. In terms of all of these things, a rational design needs to be registered with the local municipality, number one, and approved. And number two, on top of that, after the installation, that same person that issued that rational or that designed that thing needs to go back and inspect, test, and certify that that installation was actually done in accordance with that rational design. So, it's a two-part thing, and the plumber is all too greedy or too happy to start issuing documents and COCs, and by doing that, nothing wrong with issuing the COC, but make sure that all of these other things are in place before you get to that point where you do, number one, the installation, and number two, then issue a COC. Because if you issue a COC and there's no certificate from that competent person, you take the responsibility for that design as well. So be very, very careful when you look at these type of things.
Yeah, Gary, I think it's we've seen it so often, and again, it goes back to the design. I mean, how many times have we seen buildings and new builds, where space is an issue and the size of the ducts are an issue, and supporting of the geysers becomes a problem, and there's washing machines fitted underneath them, no points of discharge for drainage or from the trays or the expansion release or anything. And it becomes the plumber, like I said, make a plan. And we do, but sometimes we need to maybe just stand back, have a think about it. And when we are doing that certificate, or are we doing the requirements of the standard with regards to the advising the consumer of the non-compliance or pre-existing non-compliance, is be detailed. You can't just go and, pick 2 points and leave out the rest, because that's not what the standard requires us to do.
Yeah, 100%. Steve, and on top of that, I think one of the things is that, again, we always looking at, and we've been hammering this thing for forever regarding compliance and non-compliance and all those type of things. But I think the plumber needs to be objective when he gets to a point. And there are difficult installations. There are situations where you're pushed in a corner, but I think we just need to be very careful not to take responsibility if we get to the situation of that design, because that is definitely going to come back to you in some or other point in the future. But then also moving on in the same regulation, we're talking about storage tanks. So it also says a comprehensive operation and maintenance manual shall be readily available for the installation that incorporates storage tanks and reticulation systems. As-built drawings reflecting the pipework and equipment installation shall be required. A schematic of the pipework shall be displayed in the plant room. And then also, yes, things that requirements for a plant room is the maintenance requirements, the repairs, installation, removal of equipment, general access to the equipment, and ventilation requirements. And I think that connects to your next thing, Steve, regarding multiple story buildings where you have storage tanks on top of the roof. And maybe just to add in here is that, remember, the supplied pressure, if the supplied pressure could exceed 600 kPa, you need to install a pressure reducing or control valve to make sure that you don't overpressure the system. So, Steve, I'm going to leave this one to you. This is where you've added in on top of what we have discussed just now regarding storage tanks and all of these things, something that you've also seen and experienced.
Yeah, so Eddie, again, quite a few of the high-rise buildings that I go and have a look at, again, when we're talking 10254 and we go and have a look at the requirements, and the PRV is critical item in terms of that. But if you go and read the standard, where that water source is being fed by a constant source of water that cannot be pumped or increased or whatever. So when you're getting capacity from storage tanks on the roof, and your building is being fed from a gravity feed, obviously having a flat on the 10th floor and the tanks are on the 11th, you're getting minimal pressure there. But we tend to see the plumbers carrying that forward in terms of having a PRV there. So if it's a 400 kPa geyser, they'll have a 400 kPa valve on it or whatever they have, and that's it. But when you're going to look at what this does, and it specifically talks about high-rise buildings being fed from storage tanks, and again, the requirement for the PRV, is not there. It says there, that yes, your vacuum breakers must be there and you must have an expansion relief valve. So again, it's just something for the plumbers to go and have a look at, in terms of having a look at these high-rise buildings, doing the calculations of the pressure based on the height of the building and the average floors. And you'll find that a large majority of these buildings, if they have pressure geysers in there, and bearing in mind, some may have a 200 kPa or 100 kPa geyser, but again, in terms of pressure geysers between 400 and 600, you would find that the majority of the pressures coming from these tanks would not exceed that requirement, or that matter, the 600 kPa to terminal fittings. So again, when you have a look at this, and there's been a couple of clever plumbers that have done it, and again, when they're pricing and we're competitive and everything else, they'll allow for the expansion relief valve and the isolating valve, so it can be separated or can be isolated independently from the system. But there's a saving of 800 Rand or 850 Rand, depending on what the cost of the PRV is. So again, it's just again learning the standards, understanding the standards, and applying it. Because one of the questions that I got was, how can this car be 1,200 Rand cheaper than me? And when you go and have a look at it and you ask the question and you see the installation, you go, but hold on, this plumber's thought about it, because it's being fed from a constant source of pressure. Therefore, the standard requires it and it allows for it in terms of high-rise buildings. So therefore, you put an expansion relief valve to take care of the expansion of the tank. There's an isolating valve to isolate the tank, and the requirement for that PRV is not there, and there's a saving. So again, it's just thinking a little bit about the standards and understanding them, and go from there.
Yeah, so I think, Steve, maybe just to connect to that is, I think one of the things that we need to understand is just don't go there in every building and apply the same rule, because as you said earlier, when we're talking gravity feed, your pressure will be basically determined by the height of the building. However, if you're looking at, let's say, a 10-story building, for instance, and we let's say the floors are like 3 meters, every floor, then the picture change, because the guys right at the top, they're not going to have the same pressure as the guys at the bottom. So you will have to have a look and see and on top of that, if you do have a pressure pump supporting some of these installations, then you might need to put in a PRV, especially at the bottom floors where your pressure is going to be much higher than the top ones. Number one. Number two, as you said the other day, to just go and put a PRV on every geyser from the top to the bottom, it can amount to a lot of money. But so, yeah, you need to have a look at, do the calculations, make sure that your pressure, wherever you're going, if there's a need for it, yes, then you install it. But especially in the top floors, you're most probably not going to need that. So, that can definitely influence your pricing, and also the possibility that you may win or lose some contracts due to that.
Yeah, and I think, Kerry, the one thing that we keep telling the plumber to have is, one, understand the standards, but also a pressure gauge. So if you take a building now and you have penthouses, now penthouses are normally very elaborate flats, etc., and they want to have all these big fancy mixers. So you're going to find in that particular instance, they may put a variable speed pump in, which would then basically increase the pressure, to the terminal fittings. So again, go and have a look at that, see what the pump is set, and then in that particular case, then you're going to have to put a PRV. But I think the key thing is have a look at it and do the understanding, do the calculations, and then make the call. And if you're not sure, get hold of somebody that can.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So, Steve, I think we've basically said what we wanted to say. I see there's a couple of questions, if we can maybe have a look at this. And the first one there is from Gavin. When does the manufacturer become responsible for a fault with their product, the geyser pulling away from the casing? That's also something that you've come across, Steve, a while ago.
Yes. So I think, Gavin, thanks for that. And I think, there was one particular manufacturer that did have an issue with geysers that were pulling away from the casing. And we have, and Steve Fonsell and myself, when we had the conversation with the manufacturer, was that they will uphold the warranty. and that bring it to their attention, and they will open it up and replace it under warranty. So if you're having a challenge there, Gavin, then contact myself or Steve from Sale, and we'll guide you in terms of that. But this was a point that was raised with the manufacturer with various things that we have with our sort of every 3-month meetings where we have that conversation. So yes, Gavin, if you have that problem and you've got an issue, please just give me a shout, and I'll direct you in the right way, or we'll send your info through to the manufacturer and get some feedback for you.
Thanks, Steve. And then we've got one from Emil. A client of mine built a flat next to his house. The builder's plumber installed the geyser in the garage on the wall. He did not move the feet of the geyser. Now the geyser is upside down, so the cold inlet is at the top. And so, yeah, it's also one of those things that we see quite a lot, is where, even wall mount, where they don't move the feet. And obviously, yeah, that just indicates to me it is 9 times out of 10 a person that is not a qualified guy. He is not even looking at the installation instruction from the manufacturer, which is incidentally a picture on the geyser itself. So yeah, it's unqualified people that are being employed by the actual client.
Yeah, and I think, Kerry, just for that, the word plumber shouldn't come into that chat that Emil put through there. But again, that client is going to have a problem in the event that geyser fails within the 5-year warranty period. It will not be replaced by the manufacturer. They're quite within their rights to void it, and therefore there will be a cost to that client. So his shrugging his shoulders and everything else, I mean, not only is that affecting, he's not getting the deliverable in terms of the quantity of hot water in there. It's working harder than it should. So there's a multitude of problems there. So shrugging your shoulders and saying, well, it is what it is. Yeah, good luck to him, in terms of having that attitude and not listening to you. So unfortunately, there's not much we can do with a client or consumer that has that attitude.
Yeah, true. And that I think connects also to the question of Michael. Yeah. Where can we report the unqualified plumbers who do these illegal installations because of cheap labor? Steve, I don't know of any.
Yeah, so if you go and have a look at what the standard requires, I mean, you can report this to your local authority. Remember, the local authority is the one that has the authority in terms of doing that. So if you have a proactive local authority, which they are some, let's just to be very clear. But I think for me, and I talk about it very often, is that when we as plumbers, when we see these things, I think, we need to emphasize the fact, the risks and everything else, to that consumer. Unfortunately, if we're going to go into a thing of, like Michael's saying, where do we report them? How do we stop them? Yeah, we've got a chain of command that's broken. If this plumber was registered, yes, there's something that we can definitely do. If it was an IOPSA member, it's something we could do. But, if the guy's just a guy that Googled how to install a geyser and got it wrong, then there's very little that we can do other than report it to the local authorities. And again, depending on where your area is possibly bring it to IOPS's attention, direct it through to the building control officers and see what they will do. And there are some that will go, yes, we'll get involved. And then those will say, well, not our problem.
Steve, what I can say maybe on top of that is that you may or may not know that we are busy with quite an expensive project where we are actually training building control officers in municipalities just about countrywide. We had quite a number of these things already happening. And also, we're going forward. I'm going next week, for instance, up to Janine to do the Mopani area. So, we have been proactive. We have trained a lot of these people. So that I think the awareness is being created from my OPSA side. However, I think the easiest way to do this is to get hold of those local bylaws, and you will see in all of these bylaws they describe a plumber, and a plumber being a qualified person by means of education, a trade test, all those type of things. And I think if everybody start pushing those buttons with these municipalities to say, you've got a responsibility here, and your bylaw says a person that doesn't have this is doing work illegal, then we will create awareness, even more awareness with the municipality to take the responsibility, because they are the people that has got the authorization in terms of the Water Services Act, where they need to have a look at these things and enforce the regulations that applies to all of this.
Yeah, and then we've just got one from Bernardo saying, I've had a building where the top floor water pressure was very poor. We installed a BDS pump and only feed the top floor units with relief on these units. So again, it's that type of thing. Exactly what I was saying there earlier is getting that pump in and just, you know, increasing the pressure, make sure that it falls within the parameters and the flow rates required. So well done. And I think there are solutions to problems. You know, we've got all of these technologies that are out there. Become a sponge, absorb all of these things, but they all add value. You know, often I've seen guys say, well, it's always been like that. There's no solution. Now, if you take what Bernardus has done there, he's gone out, he's sourced a solution to the problem, gone back, sold it to them, installed it, boom, you know, bottom line's affected because you went out and did your due diligence and found a solution to the problem. You know, so well done.
All right, Steve, I don't see any other new questions coming up, so I think we have come to the end of our little presentation or our chat, and we also ran out of time. So I would like to say thank you for everybody that took the time to be here today. Hopefully we have given you something to think about. And yeah, do the right thing, stay safe, do what you need to do, and again, protect yourself. I think that's the most important thing. Steve?
Yeah, 100%, Hitty. And then just the last thing, remember Saturday, the 11th of March, World Plumbing Day. So for those guys and ladies all over the country, get all of IOPSA in your region, find out what they're doing, and see if you can get involved, you know, to just make a difference on World Plumbing Day. So again, thank you for attendance, Byron. Thank you for waking us up early. And Hitty, as always, thank you very much for the participation, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you very much, Harry. Thank you very much, Steve, as well, for joining us this morning. Thank you, and have a blessed week.